Mr. Speaker, and still I rise. And I rise today in the name of government of the people, by the people, for the people. I rise today because our country is nearing a moment of decision. I rise because we are at the intersection of democracy and autocracy. I rise to announce that at this moment in time, I have filed H-Res 537. H-Res 537 is a privileged resolution. H-Res 537 has been filed because I believe that the President of the United States has committed an impeachable act.
All right, folks, welcome Adam is here. So what just happened, guys? Nobody saw it coming. Not the parliamentarians, not Republican leadership, not Trump's own defense team. Congressman Al Green of Texas rose to his feet, calm as a man reading the weather, and pulled a procedural lever buried deep in the House rulebook. A privileged resolution forcing an immediate vote on impeachment. No committee hearings, no leadership calendar, no warning.
I will bring articles of impeachment against the President of the United States of America for taking our military to war against Venezuela, for doing it based upon some theory that in and of itself does not align with the Constitution. Some theory that if you have an indictment, you can now send in the police or the Justice Department and various officers associated. You can send them in to do something, in this case to seize the president of a country, and use the military to back them up.
A constitutional lightning strike that detonated in the center of the Capitol and left Trump's presidency teetering on the edge of a cliff it never saw coming. Just like that. No warning sirens. No courtesy calls to the minority leader's office. No time to whip the votes or rally the spin machine. A procedural motion hit the floor, and according to the ironclad rules of the House, that motion demanded immediate action. The chamber, which had been humming with the low-grade boredom of routine legislative business, suddenly snapped into a state of raw electric pandemonium. C-SPAN cameras, those silent witnesses to history, swiveled frantically as lawmakers erupted from their seats.
H-Res 57 addresses abuse of presidential powers by disregarding the separation of powers, devolving American democracy into an authoritarian government, usurping congressional power to declare war. Mr. Speaker, I take no delight in what I'm doing. I do this because I love my country. I do this because I understand that the Constitution is going to be meaningful or it will be meaningless. I do it because I understand that the President of the United States of America has a duty to consult Congress before taking this country to war.
The decorum of the world's greatest deliberative body evaporated in a matter of seconds. There was shouting, not the measured, rhetorical flourishes of debate, but the raw, guttural yelling of people who realize the ground has just shifted underneath their feet. Fingers were pointed, aisles became battle lines. The gavel banged repeatedly, a futile attempt to calm a storm that had already made landfall. And then the vote came. It was fast, it was furious, and it was definitive.
Because they have the power. We have but one power that we can use without the consent of the other side. That one power is impeachment. One power. The power to impeach. And we are in a countdown. We're in a countdown because whether the president likes it or not, whether I like it or not, the people of the country want to see him impeached. And whether he likes it or not, or whether I like it or not, or anybody else, he is going to be impeached before he leaves office again. And he should be, for what he has done to the country in terms of its devolution into authoritarianism. He should be impeached.
When the electronic tally board lit up and froze, the numbers flashed a stark, chilling message: 232 in favor, 197 opposed. Read that split again and let it sink into your bones. That is virtually the exact same coalition, the exact same margin that carried the weight of Trump's second impeachment. It is a statistical mirror image of a time when the nation was already fractured and the presidency was already under siege. This was not a marginal victory or a close call that could be dismissed as a fluke. This was the House of Representatives, the body closest to the raw will of the American electorate, standing up and saying in one unified voice, "We see high crimes, we see misdemeanors, and we will no longer look away." The momentum is no longer theoretical. It is tangible. It is a wave crashing against the bulwarks of the White House, and the structure is beginning to groan under the weight. The shock factor of this maneuver cannot be overstated. In the modern era of hyper-partisan media and 24-hour news cycles, true surprises are almost extinct. Everything is leaked, teased, or forecasted by senior administration officials speaking on background. But this was a black swan event swimming through the floor of the House. Republican leadership was utterly blindsided. Their floor managers were caught in a procedural headlock with no escape hatch. The rapid response war rooms designed to defend the president had nothing prepared. No talking points about presidential harassment. No pre-taped videos condemning the process. There was only stunned silence followed by the frantic, panicked typing of aides trying to figure out what the hell just happened to their majority. The lack of preparation on the MAGA side of the aisle was a gaping vulnerability, and Al Green drove a constitutional truck right through it. The specific charges underpinning this sudden vote are not vague abstractions about abuse of power in a general sense. They are laser-focused on a specific, concrete, and demonstrably unconstitutional action: the unauthorized military strikes against Iran. The articles of impeachment, read aloud amid the cacophony of the chamber, centered on the president's unilateral decision to launch offensive operations without seeking the constitutionally mandated authorization from Congress. This isn't just a policy disagreement over foreign entanglements. This is a direct, flagrant violation of the War Powers Resolution and, more fundamentally, a breach of Article 1 of the Constitution, which vests the power to declare war and the power to authorize the use of military force squarely in the hands of the legislative branch, not the executive. It is the Founding Fathers' most sacred firewall against tyranny, and the House just declared that Donald Trump poured gasoline on it and lit a match. The velocity of the vote is a story in itself. In the time it takes to watch a feature film or sit through a long dinner, the trajectory of a presidency was fundamentally altered. There was no months-long investigation. There was no dramatic testimony from a whistleblower in a skiff. There was just Al Green standing up, the clerk reading the motion, and the gavel falling. That speed is a weapon in and of itself. It prevents the target from digging in. It prevents the media from muddying the waters with both sides analysis. It forces every single member of Congress to look at the Constitution and make a split-second gut-check decision. Are you with the rule of law, or are you with the man who broke it? The fact that 232 of them answered the law in such a compressed time frame is a staggering display of political will. And the timing? Good Lord, the timing is a narrative supernova. This did not happen during a quiet, peaceful lull in the news cycle. This detonation occurred at the precise moment when the Trump administration is already buried under an avalanche of scandals so heavy they threaten to crush the West Wing into dust. Let's trace the wreckage that leads directly to this House floor showdown. We are just hours removed from the explosive revelations surrounding the Pan Bondi evidence tampering scandal. a scandal that reaches directly into the machinery of the Department of Justice and suggests a coordinated effort to shield the powerful from accountability. We are still reeling from the emergence of that video footage, the one that places the president in proximity to the kind of social circles that the average voter finds not just distasteful, but outright sinister. The whispers about the president's physical and cognitive health have grown from a murmur to a deafening roar, with every public appearance now scrutinized for signs of decline. The leaked election takeover plan, a blueprint for subverting the democratic will of the voters, is still being dissected by legal scholars and opposition researchers alike. And let's not forget the judiciary. Federal judges from coast to coast have been slapping down executive orders with such frequency and forceful language that the White House counsel's office must look like a triage unit in a war zone. And perhaps most damning of all, the rats are fleeing the sinking ship. The president's inner circle, the folks who used to whisper sweet nothings of loyalty and victory into his ear, are now leaking like a rusted sieve. They see the writing on the wall, and that writing spells Impeachment. The moment his own people started turning, the vultures on Capitol Hill began to circle. And now, Al Green has given them the signal to dive. Congress is no longer content to hold hearings or send sternly worded letters. Congress is saying, out loud and on the record, we are done with this experiment. We are moving toward removal. The political seismograph is also registering a massive shift within the GOP coalition. Look closely at the vote tally, not just the ayes and nays, but the third column. The column marked present. Reports filtering out of the chamber indicate that roughly 10 Republicans chose not to stand with the president. They didn't vote no, they voted present. In the parliamentary language of Washington, D.C., a present vote is not neutrality. It is a silent scream. It is a Republican member of Congress looking at the evidence of unauthorized war, looking at the constitutional crisis and saying, I cannot in good conscience defend this man, but I am too scared of the primary voters back home to actively vote against him. That abstention is a political death sentence for a president who demands absolute fealty. If 10 members of his own party are unwilling to even cast a vote in his defense on a surprise procedural motion, what happens when the pressure of a full-blown Senate trial bears down on them? What happens when the evidence is played on a loop for the entire nation? That fracture line in the GOP foundation is wide enough to drive a Mack truck through, and it's only going to widen as this process unfolds, and we cannot ignore the sound outside the Capitol windows. The chants of the No Kings protests have been echoing across the National Mall for weeks. These are not the fringe lunatics that cable news likes to mock. These are ordinary citizens who have been showing up day after day, holding signs that simply state the constitutional truth. America does not have a monarch. The president is not immune from the law. The protest movement has been the pressure valve in the streets, and now, for the first time, the gears of government inside the building are starting to grind in perfect synchronization with the voices outside. That convergence, the street protest meeting the floor vote, is the most potent political accelerant known to man. It is the kind of alignment that brought down presidencies in the past, and it is now laser-focused on the Oval Office. So let's pause and take a deep breath to survey the full, terrifying scope of what happened in that chamber. Because the details of Al Green's procedural judo move are essential to understanding why this time feels so profoundly different. The normal path to impeachment is a slog. It is a mud march through the Judiciary Committee, a place where motions can be tabled, witnesses can be stonewalled, and the clock can be run out. It is a process designed for delay and, frankly, for the protection of the status quo. Al Green circumvented the entire obstacle course by invoking a privileged resolution. In the lexicon of the House, privileged means this takes precedence over everything else. It means the leadership cannot just pocket the motion and pretend it doesn't exist. They have to act. They have to schedule floor time. They have to allow a vote. It is the parliamentary equivalent of pulling the fire alarm in the middle of a board meeting. You can't ignore the alarm. You have to evacuate the building. And that's exactly what the House did. It evacuated the normal business of the day and plunged headfirst into the business of judging a president. The specific language of the resolution is brutal in its simplicity. It alleges that the president's actions in ordering strikes against Iranian targets without prior notification to, let alone authorization from, the relevant congressional committees and the full House and Senate constitute a high crime and misdemeanor as defined by the Constitution. The War Powers Resolution is not a suggestion. It is not a guideline that can be waived because the president feels like being a wartime leader. It is a statute born from the trauma of Vietnam and the secret bombings of Cambodia. It was designed specifically to prevent a president from unilaterally dragging the nation into a war based on ego, bad intelligence, or a desperate need to distract from domestic political turmoil. And that is precisely the scenario that Democrats and the 10 Republicans who voted present believe they are witnessing. They see a commander-in-chief who is hemorrhaging political capital at home, who is facing a mutiny in his own cabinet, and who is lashing out with military force abroad to change the subject. And they have decided that is an impeachable abuse of power. The aftermath of the vote on the floor was not the usual orderly shuffle out of the chamber. It was chaos in the truest sense of the word. C-SPAN's cameras, usually fixed and predictable, were swinging wildly trying to capture the shouting matches that erupted in the aisles. The audio feed was a cacophony of overlapping voices, gavel strikes, and the distant, muffled sound of some kind of physical altercation near the rear doors. The fact that the Capitol Police had to briefly initiate a lockdown protocol, a security posture usually reserved for external threats or violent demonstrations, speaks to the level of raw, unvarnished tension that now permeates the building. It was a short lockdown, but the symbolism of it is heavy. The People's House, the temple of democracy, was on such a knife's edge that they had to pause movement. And the 5 arrests? Details are still sketchy, but the reports of scuffles and detainments confirm that this wasn't just verbal jousting. This was an emotional powder keg that actually sparked. Compared to the nightmare of January 6th, this was a small firecracker, but it was a firecracker set off inside a room already filled with leaking gas. It shows just how close we are to a genuine physical boiling point. Now, we must confront the stark, unvarnished reality of where this puts the nation. The first and most immediate takeaway is the historical weight of the moment. Donald Trump is now an impeached president for the 3rd time. No other occupant of the Oval Office has ever carried that singular badge of disgrace. It is an unprecedented stain on the historical record, one that future generations will read about in textbooks as the definitive marker of a presidency defined by constitutional conflict. This is not a badge of honor he can wear. It is a millstone around the neck of his legacy, and it is dragging him down into the depths of a Senate trial. Second, the method of delivery matters immensely. The surprise attack, the procedural ambush, is a game changer. It demonstrates a new level of tactical sophistication from the opposition and a shocking level of unpreparedness from the president's allies. It proves that the House can move at the speed of a scandal, not the speed of a bureaucracy. It means Trump can never, ever feel safe on a day that Congress is in session. Any gavel strike could be the one that starts the countdown clock on his removal. That kind of psychological pressure on a man already showing signs of severe strain is a dangerous, volatile variable. Third, the math is both solid and slippery. The 232 votes are a rock-solid foundation. That's the base. But the real story is in the margin. The 197 no votes are fewer than the Republican conference size, indicating defections to present. That present category is the canary in the coal mine. It represents the soft underbelly of the GOP defense. If the wind blows just a little bit harder, if the bond market crashes another 1,000 points, if another video surfaces, if another general resigns in protest, those present votes can very easily become yes votes on articles of impeachment, and more crucially, they can become guilty votes in the Senate. The path to 67 votes in the upper chamber looks steep right now, but it is not a vertical cliff. It is a slope, and the ground is getting very slippery for those standing at the top trying to hold the line for Trump. Fourth, the Republican fracturing is no longer a whisper, it is a public record. 10 members of the House GOP looked at this surprise vote and decided that standing with Trump was a worse political bet than standing on the sidelines. That is a seismic event. In the tribal politics of the modern GOP, to not defend the leader is to commit heresy. The fact that 10 of them were willing to be labeled heretics tells you everything you need to know about the internal polling data they are seeing back in their districts. They are terrified of being dragged down by the anchor of a 33% approval rating and a war that nobody asked for. They are looking for an off-ramp. The Senate trial will offer them that off-ramp, dressed up in the respectable language of constitutional duty and rule of law. Fifth, this impeachment is not a fishing expedition. It is tied to a specific, concrete act, the Iran strikes. It is not about a phone call to Ukraine or a hush money payment to an adult film star. It is about the commander-in-chief bypassing the Constitution to send young Americans into harm's way for reasons that are, at best, opaque and, at worst, personally motivated. That is a narrative that cuts through the noise. It is simple, it is powerful, and it is the kind of charge that can sway a handful of principled conservatives in the Senate who still believe the Constitution means something more than just a piece of parchment. What happens next is a journey into uncharted waters. The House has done its job. The baton has been passed to the Senate. The Senate must hold a trial. There is no discretion here. The rules of the Senate mandate that once articles of impeachment are presented, a trial commences. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court will likely preside. The chamber will transform into a courtroom, and the nation will be forced to watch day after day as the House impeachment managers lay out the evidence of an unauthorized war, of a president acting like a king, of a commander-in-chief who put lives at risk without the consent of the people's representatives. The math in the Senate is daunting for those who want removal. Democrats hold 51 seats. They need 67 to convict. That means finding 16 Republicans willing to vote guilty. Right now, in the immediate aftermath of the House surprise vote, you might only find a handful of Republican senators willing to even say the trial is serious. But Senate trials have a strange alchemical power. They are slow. They are deliberate. They remove the story from the frantic ADHD rhythm of cable news and place it into the solemn, grave rhythm of a courtroom. In that hush, evidence tends to echo louder. Witnesses, if called, can be devastating. And the pressure on those 49 Republican senators from their own constituents, from the mothers who don't want their kids sent to war on a whim, from the business owners watching the stock market crater due to geopolitical instability, that pressure will be immense. The political fallout from this vote will be immediate and severe. The president's approval rating, already scraping the bottom of the barrel at historic lows, is likely to take another leg down. Moderate suburban voters, the ones who decide elections in swing districts, are repulsed by chaos and constitutional violations. This surprise impeachment vote is the dictionary definition of both. It reinforces the narrative that Trump is not a strong leader. He is an unstable force that creates instability. That is electoral poison. It feeds directly into the Democratic narrative for the midterms. It makes the case for divided government, for a check on executive power, for a Congress that will actually do its job. If this impeachment trial drags on through the summer and into the fall campaign season, it will be the central issue on every ballot in America. And that is a referendum that the GOP, with its current leader, simply cannot win. The velocity of the vote also sends a chilling message directly to the Oval Office. It says, "You have no safe harbor. Not even the floor of a Republican-controlled House is safe. Not even a quiet procedural day is safe. The wolves are not just at the door. They have learned how to pick the lock." And that realization is likely to trigger a dangerous, erratic response. When cornered, the president does not retreat. He escalates. We should expect more incendiary rhetoric, more challenges to the courts, and potentially more reckless action on the world stage designed to create a rally around the flag effect. But that is a gambler's last throw of the dice, And it rarely works when the House knows you're holding a losing hand. The betting markets are the final dispassionate arbiter of this moment. They don't care about your feelings or your political affiliation. They care about probability and profit. And the odds on impeachment and removal have surged to a staggering 67%. That is a supermajority of the smart money. That is the financial sector, the people who hedge risk for a living, saying that the removal of Donald Trump is now the most likely outcome of this political crisis. When the markets speak that loudly, the politicians listen, because those same market forces are what fund their campaigns and their retirements. If Wall Street thinks Trump is toast, K Street will soon follow, and the political support structure in the Senate will begin to crumble from the inside out. This surprise impeachment vote is the fulcrum upon which the entire Trump era is now balanced. It is the convergence of all the scandals, all the lies, all the leaked documents, and all the authoritarian impulses into a single constitutional moment of reckoning. The House has lit the fuse. It is a short fuse. It burns toward a Senate chamber that will soon be transformed into a trial court for the presidency. The shouting on the floor has quieted for now, but the echo of that gavel, the echo of those 232 votes, is the sound of the American system of checks and balances roaring back to life. It is the sound of a presidency entering its terminal stage. And it is the sound of history being written, not by the man in the Oval Office, but by the people's representatives in the Capitol he tried so hard to ignore. The Senate trial looms, the evidence mounts, the walls close in, and the nation waits, breath held, for the final act of this unprecedented political drama. The gavel has fallen on the surprise vote. The next time it falls, it may very well fall on the presidency itself.